Hi guys, Frankie B from Frozen Sand with a long overdue episode of working with power tools, and I do apologize for somewhat of the random scheduling of such episodes, but it's rather a case of finding interesting things to talk about in some form of completion that is a little bit more than just hey, check this out, this is cool, huh? Kind of thing. So going back to, as you may or may not know, of course, is I've gone back to working on weapon implementation, and something I've run across that I find pretty interesting is how we are now with enough assets and content and let's say development time is able to come up with a system to integrate weapons into Unreal 4 that is certainly unique from how things were done in Urban Terror in Tech 3. So, sort of taking a trip down memory lane, I guess. How things, as far as weapons are included in Urban Terror in Tech 3, is almost ad hoc as to single channel requirements in adding a new weapon based on an impulse. So we've taken the direction of this time around. Well, actually, let's continue on with that story because it's I find it interesting in itself, in that each item, each element that is added to the Tech 3 engine is unique to its own, which means that any component or any weapon or any loadout item is unique to itself in that things like specifications and icons and animations and this and that and so forth. And the other thing is bound and dependent upon the asset that has been included. So this is to say that IdTech or FS Tech development of Urban Terror has been driven more by art content than it has been by any kind of code logic. So the addition of a new weapon, let's take for example Hoy's a Glock, took about from concept to inclusion took about 2 years worth of development time, I guess you might want to call it, of it sitting around for most of the time waiting for somebody to be able to do their thing for it because of the unique requirements of a per item requirement. So in this case, somebody obviously had to make the model, so in this case that was Hoy, and then somebody had to do the coding, like for example the weapon specifications and the icon implementations that was which was all code side, and then of course menu markups which were scripted using Quake script or whatever you want to call it. So it took a lot of time and effort of a lot of different individuals to include that package into a current iteration or build of the game itself. Very, very time consuming for a process that should be rather simple. So, and the back end effect in some cases is cross asset dependency. So all the weapons, for example, all use the same silencer. It's a part of the asset package. So we get some unusual behavior. So bugs, if you add 5 new weapons to the loadout, you have 5 possible sources of bugs being introduced into the system, as opposed to creating a system which is, by design standards, is considered a single channel solution, where if you fix one bug, then it fixes the same bug that's being occurred in all dependencies within that hierarchy. So in this case, we're using the shooter weapon instant blueprint as our base or C++ parent, and if you checked it out, it was rather limited to what it could do for the requirements of the shooter example. And we are expanding upon that, and over time, it's bloomed into a much more nicer package of being able to keep everything in one place, so to speak, that's spread out all over the place in Tech 3. So, it's been added to and developed and over time as part of the ideal development pipeline of making things, say, a little bit easier for anybody to add stuff, kind of future-proof the design, so things can be added that we didn't anticipate that we wanted to add today, as to the logic that a lot of the game has to have some form of functionality, as in make it work. And then over time, what sort of rises to the surface is how the design needs to work in combination with the game as a complete package through a single channel solution that one person can just sit down and do everything. So that's what we're going to take a look at what we have so far. What does it mean as to possible future considerations as to third-party inclusion? So to sort of kick things off, the starting point is usually populating the viewport or the weapon asset as a component element. So it doesn't really look at this as being, hey, this is a weapon, this is an MP7A1. What it looks at it is simply simple static or skeletal mesh based component, and then we can just build up based on various additions that are made available for us or as we develop them. So sounds a little disconnected at the moment, but it'll all sort of come together during the development process, so to speak, based on the logic path that we would like to follow. So in this case, weapons in Unreal, and of course in Urban Terror is the say the focus point, the synergy point of all things Urban Terror, and of course we all know that it's really one of the most hot button topics that we have going. So as to things like specifications, we want to change this, we want you to change that, we'd like this additions and what have you. So with the eye towards future proofing, so to speak, as to how things will work within a single channel pipeline, this is where we're this is from a starting point, it made sense to build things based on component, which is something that we've also translated over into our character model design, which obviously I'll be talking about in the future. But to kind of set the stage here, to give a point, a starting point as to here we're at, and then maybe come back 6 months, maybe a year from now, or ever how long it takes before something else interesting comes up, to kind of point out how things are constructed, and then we can look at it at a future date as the ideas start to actually become implemented, so you can see it clearly as to how things are going to be structured off of it. Now this is what would be called, I guess you would call it secret sauce stuff. This is the kind of thing when you hear people talking about, yeah, we have a system to do this, we have we have a melee system, we have a character animation system, and they really don't go into details of how that system design is integrated as part of their design pathway. So one thing being connected to another, which is the advantage that we've acquired, of course, by switching to the Unreal 4 engine, is the ability to build based on the component design nature of Unreal 4 versus the fit to finish demands of the id Tech 3 engine, which of course caused a lot of backing up of the things that should have been fixed or implemented a long time ago. So you see that once again the good example is the Glock example that took 2 years to implement. That's how long it generally takes to have inclusion, because the system really didn't allow that point in time where it just said, okay, it's done, pass it on, and let other people have to deal with it. You had to go back and do the same process, the same cycle over and over and over again, which was rather time consuming. So looking at our design pathway, this has become more of the obvious place to begin and forking out from there, and it'll become a little bit more apparent as I move forward here, hopefully at a faster clip from space. So so the starting point, of course, is just simply populating the component, and you see it display in third-person views, or in our viewport here. We have two. It looks like we have two identical versions of the same model, but in actuality, they're designed for two different pathways. One would be for Mesh 1 and one for Mesh 3, which is also known as the first-person and third-person perspective models, and these are just passed on to that particular asset within the shooter weapon instant. So can't show you how that's done because it is C++ code, and being a content creator, my access to this and making any changes to this is rather limited, and the point of fact is I don't want to have to do that, because everything should be done within a single channel of just sitting down as a system and say, okay, I want to make a weapon today. How do I do that? I add this component, I add that component, and then it just builds up over time. And as you can see, I already have a few items that have been introduced into the viewport as part of the makeup of that that particular weapon for that particular mesh, be it first person or third person. So that's somewhat interesting in itself, because as everything is contained in one place, as opposed to how things were done in id Tech 3, which once again stuff was over here and stuff was over there, and now we have everything as far as the build is contained in one spot. So for example, this weapon here, the iron sights are kind of broken off as a separate element, so they can be added or changed to any kind of sighting system that we wish. Now that's interesting in itself, because the component system also supports blueprints, so the functionality of the weapon can be changed based on the accessory that's been attached to it. So a good example of that is scope type weapons. Or weapons with optical sights that can be made functional as part of, let's say, the form versus functionality of being an attachment to your weapon. So if we wanted to, say for example, working on the DE, we wanted to add a scope to it, we could easily add a scope to it, and the component itself, like for example the silencer here, as you can see over here, the suppressor is actually a blueprint component that, when it is attached to it, becomes functional based on the type of input that will either turn it on, turn it off, or so you can add the silencer, and then if you don't, as part of your loadout, and during game time you can make it functional as a silencer, or remove it but still have it part of your loadout, so that things like, for example, adding a scope to your weapon, any weapon that we wish can become a sniper rifle, and then we just reconfigure the operation of that weapon based on the attachment. So this allows for a much broader range of specifications for a particular weapon, without limiting it to just bang bang shoot shoot type of specifications. So same thing for things like if we wanted to add optic sights. Obviously, we're not going to implement sights and scopes in the same manner that most games does, where the implementation is, if you want to, the most typical implementation, for example, of iron sights is to gain benefit from it. You have to kind of stop. Slow. You can slow down, walk, and then you have this breathing thing that you have to do, and all this kind of stuff. Where Urban Terror is a 100% running gun, but it's an option that we've kind of fielded in the past, is just simply make those kind of things more of a visual effect, rather than a proper implementation as to the game mechanics and the functionality of it. So if you add on an optic sight, for example, then the option of making it functional is there, but at the same time it's not going to impede the speed of the game by any sense of the imagination, as simply being a visual type of component, rather than something that is usable as part of the mechanics of the game. So moving on forward, that's an interesting aspect in itself. So if you want to add an optic sight to this, then we can look at purely cosmetic type of integrations to that component that's been added, and it's managed and supported by its addition, meaning that we don't have to go anywhere else in code to make things functional as we do with id Tech 3. And that, of course, is very desirable, because everything from this point sort of kind of forks out. Once again, we'll get to that in a minute. I think that's okay. What should we chit-chat about here? Obviously, we could select different skeletal meshes. The types of materials that could be applied to it could be increased or improved upon based on various different options. So, we could change the material to gold-plated AK-47s or different types of material designs and loadout flavors. Now, kind of touching on how this is as far as future proofing goes, it means that basically with our new licensing ability with the Unreal 4 engine, which we couldn't take advantage of, no way, no how, in the Intech 3 engine, is that third-party interest, people who are interested in making weapons that they wish to contribute to the game of Urban Terror, can instead of sitting around talking about, hey, here's a cool weapon that I think would be a nice addition to the game. So instead of us say, yeah, okay, well, we'll think about it, the response to those kind of questions will be, yeah, sure, go ahead, make one and get some material supplied to it, and then supply it to us under at least Creative Commons 0, which is compatible with the Epic's Unreal 4 engine, and we'll certainly if it fits within the theme and the framework and what have you, we'll put it in as an inclusion, and instead of spending 2 years implementing it as we did with the Glock, which started out just as a community member project. It would be easier to implement it within a very short period of time, and then at a future date distribute it as a DLC component element of the Steam portal that we'll be going with as far as Resurgence goes. So I think covered that as quickly as I could. And we have other areas here to look at is the animation mode, the anim class, etc., which is well, we'll get into a little bit more of that in a moment, but these are just basically a way to tell the weapons blueprint, our system, to at the top hierarchy where the first attachment is established as far as animation is being fed to the particular item in hand. Now, just to kind of rehash here a bit, the display here contains both the first and third person model requirements as far as the weapon goes, and then we expanded upon that as to different directions that data has to be forked out into as part of the shooter weapon instant C++ class. So as well as we can add hundreds and hundreds of weapons if we wish. And if we need to make any corrections or make any kind of additions to a particular weapon class, as to say unique requirements, not everything goes bang bang. So we want we have things like grenades and knives and what have you. The idea would be obviously is to implement that into the shooter class, and then that would trickle down into every weapon that has been assigned to the parent, without having to once again going back to Intech 3 and making each and every weapon unique onto itself, which is rather frustrating. So I just thought I'd hopefully cover that enough to give an idea of the nature, more of the nature of how things can be introduced and implemented as a component, rather than saying to yourself, looking at, okay, this is a weapon and it has to be unique onto its own function. So we put everything into single channel, got one single developer can sit down and in a day come up with a new weapon, as opposed to waiting 2 years for something that's been on the rack forever. It's the same case with the P90. It's been, oh boy, it was on the rack even before I joined up, which is about 7 years now. So it's probably been hanging out for about 10 years. I'm not too sure of the timeline on it, but it's been around for a long time, sitting on the shelf waiting to be implemented. So that kind of covers the basic build requirements of popping stuff in, and how as well as to imply that third-party inclusion into adding weapons to the loadout is certainly an option, as opposed to us having to guess what weapons in the loadout would be nice to have, just based on its story. So this is probably one of the reasons why the Hoist Glock was added, is more than it was just being a weapon, but it had a story, it had a history behind it that was more urban terrorist than just another blob of mesh that went bang bang. So moving on, how does this thing kind of work out as far as being included as far as single channel solutions goes. This is where things get interesting, because over here we look at some of the configurations that have been assigned to our shooter weapon C++ class, which ripples down into every blueprint that this can be applied to. Now let's kind of fork off here for a bit. What this means, in essence, as far as future proofing goes, is everything and anything that is put into the world of urban terror, as far as static or skeletal models, can be applied to world space as a weapon. So, you know, a trash can can become a weapon as to being able to interact with it. A brick, a broken bottle, a baseball bat, a Ginsu knife, a katana. Whatever, you know, basically anything. Oh, you know, even the flags can become weapons based on just including them as part of a weapon class. That's not to say they will be, but just to indicate that the future proofing of the design means it's a simple would be a rather simple inclusion rather than something that is uniquely added into the game as to the requirement of both asset and asset being available, and then a code applied to it secondary. So logic-wise, the Urban Terror Id Tech 3 has been very much a content-driven project, meaning that if it wasn't built, there was no way to actually really include that as part of any upgrade that we have, you know, had intended purposely to add to the game, so to speak. So anyways, you can see here that we have different types of configurations for this particular weapon as far as damage goes: head, chest, stomach, leg damage. The atypical configuration that it is now in Id Tech 3, as well as being able to select scaling as to modifiers for things like Kevlar and helmet, and things like recoil speed and recoil rates and spreads and so forth, which you're probably a lot more familiar with this kind of stuff than I am. Damage type can be controlled through a damage, once again, through blueprint component idea, where you can build, you just have to build it once, and then you can apply that to every other weapon that's within the loadout configuration. Well, not in the loadout configuration itself, but within the blueprint child class, which is based once again on the shooter weapon instant. So moving down, weapon configuration, this is where it can be expanded upon. You know, these are just some of the items that are items that have been included and upgraded into, as far as our desire to have a single channel solution. So this is sort of continued on here as to infinite ammo, which is, this would be pretty good idea for doing like an instant gib type of game type. All of these can be obviously cast to by a game type blueprint, once again, or game type code. So these are just kind of check boxes for as well as to usability for things like loadout and what have you, which is all, once again, single channel sourced. We just go to one spot, everything is in this one place, and then as a starting point we can obviously find or backtrack to whatever needs updating within this system. So unlike well, how to put it, if we were just using vanilla Unreal 4, especially in the shooter class, the shooter example, it doesn't take long to realize that there's a lot of disconnect as to the logic pathway, how things are connected with one another, because a lot of stuff is hidden in various different places. So you have information in the blueprint, you have information that's done as a C++ class, and of course, if you're doing all of your stuff based on blueprints, then all the takes elements that are required to make something functional can be kind of masked or hidden within the C++ coding. So this takes us back to the same problem we're having with Id Tech 3 as to implementation, is that anytime we wanted to add something, it became a chore. So for markup, you had your specifications were in the C++, the icons were in the C++, or in the code. The menu what do you call them? Images were also in code too as well. So it became a rather, you could have 3-4 people involved in just doing a single markup. where one person now with a single path design can do everything in one place, which is really cool. So component add-ons and so forth. Now, what we're talking about, we haven't really settled on, or even really looked at, of how we would implement things like silencers and sights and lasers and what have you as an attachment. But it can certainly be added as a component. So historically speaking, once again, it was difficult to do any kind of upgrading because you do, everything was kind of detached once again, as to the idea of everything being in one place. So once, as the example, as I kind of mentioned, is all the weapons uses the same silencer, so you got to kind of remember how to attach it and where to put that. So just to make it available, we can add that as a component, and then later on add it in as an element that we would add in as, say, a impact template. This is what connects the weapon, being single point source, to the weapon impacts list, which takes into consideration surface information like is it stone, is it water, is it snow, is it dirt, and etc., etc., and then generates the appropriate hit response for that. Blood is part of that too as well. So if you're shooting somebody, you get the blood spraying and what have you coming off of the model, and that's all handled through the impact template. The FX this is something that's been a legacy thing from the original shooter, which needs to be changed. Right now I got kind of the shell eject blueprint tied into this, just so once again it's there. This needs to be, of course, needs the proper alignment tag. Right now it kind of shoots off in all kinds of directions when you fire the weapon, which is kind of annoying at the moment, but once again, better to have something look bad and it's there in your face, so you know when it needs to be fixed, rather than putting it into place and it get kind of overlooked over time and what have you. Muzzle attachment point for the flash socket. This would be also include things like the silencer, for example, as the skeletal mesh is attached to this. Other components, blueprint classes can be added to it, like the fire camera shake can be added and to each weapon, and each weapon can be unique to its own. Force feedback system has been included here. We can add a pickup sound and a drop sound. This is kind of in conflict with what's going on down here, which I'll get to in a moment. So as to usability, I'm not too sure of how it's going to be of any use really, but once again, we're at a starting point. We'll check back in another 6 months from now to see if there's been any kind of update as to functionality. Primary icon. This would be the idea of how in Id 3 all the icons and all the loadout menu items as to imagery are contained within the code, which makes it difficult once again as far as implementation goes. Ammo counts and primary clip offsets, icon offsets, so you can move icons around the screen. This could be done something later on as to, say, customization of UI layouts, who knows. Whether or not it uses a laser dot, uses custom crosshairs, use custom aiming crosshair. Not too sure what that's all about. Once again, when we get further down the road, I can explain that a little bit more in detail if it's of that interest. Now, this is where things get a little bit more interesting as far as the implementation problems, certainly relating back to the Id 3 design, in that weapon additions were rather difficult because you had to take in account, of course, the different types of animations that are applied to a game that its synergy it revolves around weapon usage. So when we add the P90, the unique contact points in the hand holding of that weapon was problematic, as it would require an extensive set of new different combinations for contacting points with that unique handhold. The grip of the rifle the grip is somewhat of a more of a pistol type of nature, and then of course the forward grip with the thumb through it wasn't really like a front grip of say the UMP 45. So a lot of fiddling around to try to actually prevent the at least the first person weapon from looking like it's shooting through the player's hand, kind of thing. There was a lot of hacking going on, so to speak. So with the with this design system, everything is done through a montage. And the nice thing about a montage is everything is contained within a single package, which you can apply a name to, a global identifier, so to speak. And because the you can only play one montage at a time. If we send that action to where it needs to go, then anything that that is triggered after that doesn't have to be accounted for. So if we say, for example, the reload makes for a good example, because we're sending out 4 montages within that cycle of being reload, and that would include the first person pawn and the third person, as well as the weapon for the first person and third person. So this would so the pawn would be the animation of the action being performed as far as a reload goes. So that would be like a pantomime kind of action, you might say. And this is followed up by the weapon just simply being part of a montage itself, which has the corresponding action as to being operated on a mechanical level. So if you eject a magazine, then you can the montage handles the distribution of the first and third person, and then the weapon is functional by a montage that has been attached directly to this and corresponding to this weapon, as to, where is it? As to this guy here. It's all channeled back in through our animation blueprint for this weapon as a slot in the as a slot in the animation graph. Let's see if I can quickly just pop that up. Okay, here it is. Just how difficult this is. Okay, so this is our, okay, so to start off the migration pathway, obviously need a clip to be played and channeled through to our final animation pose. So in this case, you know, anything will do. And this, what seems to be the most logical, of course, is the idle state. In other words, the weapon not functioning at all. So if we go ahead and we toss, so that's our connection here, which uses, if we go back to our animation here, information of what's being triggered, the weapon first person and third person, which are both basically the same model, are passed on to the weapon using the MP7A reload montage. And can we quickly show that? Not really, I guess. So that puts this into this here, which we have only one slot set up for the animation right now. This is not really descriptive enough. I'll probably change this over time, but it sends it in down. That just basically throws it into the mixer through the using the an instance. You know, this is a child of a parent once again, and it just simply throws the whatever montage needs to be triggered into the pipeline, and then it comes. When it comes down the migration pathway, it is triggered by this. And as I mentioned, montages are one-shot deals, meaning that if in midstream we go from, say, from a reload sequence to say, okay, we don't want that, we want to switch weapons, boom, which then detaches the reloading sequence that is being performed at that moment, and then of course goes to a weapon switch without having to cancel out the previous animation sequence. Very nice, and that you know, we don't get into that. The only way you can get out of something is by an argument kind of thing. So within the animograph, within the animograph, you usually have to have an enter or an exit statement, say as part of the migration pathway that says, okay, hold on, the guy's made a change, he's switching. Okay, we need to switch out of this pathway and go to another logic pathway. We just basically make sequence bundles, which is then attached to the skeletal mesh of the player model. So moving on. Let's see, we have, and this can grow, obviously, because based on whatever's added to the shooter weapon instant. So this kind of hopefully this kind of points out how things from a central point starts to fork out, and you can always go to the single point source to figure out where the migration pathway is occurring. That's connected to the one, connected to the other, and connected to the other kind of thing. So sounds, we just started working on those two as well. It's because there's been an update to the Unreal 4 engine that allows for better localization as far as direction and distance goes, so you can have you can hear the firefight going on way off in the background to a certain preset, currently at a preset distance. As this becomes more and more improved, there's there are certainly plans for better audio features that have been introduced in 15, and it's to be carried on apparently into 16 and 17 and 18, etc., which will improve overall sound. Let's say the sound quality. Apparently, just based on turning it on, the audio features the new audio features that have been added to 15 will improve quality by default. Apparently, haven't tried it yet, but I'm just happy that we don't need to have dual sounds like for creating direction and distance. Before you had to have you had a local and a remote node, and then the local node had to have or could make use of stereo sound versus remote sounds, which obviously to make them work would have to be mono to indicate distance as well as direction. So that's one of the reasons why, of course, I've jumped back on to doing weapons implementation, so to speak. And this will become a lot more, let's say, in-depth as to the future or to future-proofing the design, so to speak. Okay, types. So right now we have limited type, primary, secondary, and sidearm, which are, of course, the standard requirements that could include. But this, once again, being a child of a parent class, can be increased quite easily, not treat the weapon as being a unique snowflake, so to speak. So, future-proofing wise, additions can be made to, is this a melee weapon, for example? Like, is it a knife? Is it throwable? Is it? So all of these become more of a procedural parametric type of implementation rather than something that is defined as unique to the weapon. So a grenade, you can throw the grenade, but to be able to do the same thing with a knife, that same effect would have to be done as separate and unique to that particular item, which is, of course, is the root to all evil known as bugs. So with that implementation, we go back up here, and of course we can have fire animation would be different for the MP7A as opposed to using a knife, or in theory anything else that could be added as a weapon, say for example the flag, that would have the corresponding action pertained within this blueprint and not necessarily have to start going back and implementing the feature addition to third person and first person directly as being unique snowflakes again. So this is I would expect this to grow over time. Projectile weapons and not so much focusing on what the object is, but how does it have to perform as a mechanic as part of the game. And just to kind of back up again, of course, everything can be implemented as a blueprint, so the functionality of the element can be built into it. So grenades, for example, how they behave, how they explode, how they cause damage, all that is built into the asset and not as part of the code flow in general. So I think we're kind of hopefully finishing up here. Okay. I don't think there's anything else that needs to be covered here at the moment. But I thought this was an interesting subject as compared to how we're progressing as far as what has to be done today, as well as ensuring that the design pathway is future-proof, so we don't run into the same problems that we did with the design pathway that the URT IDTech 3 pathway seems to have taken us in having things implemented into the game that is based on the item that's being used. Like I would say the best description is that each and every weapon is object aware, as opposed to being an object that is simply based on a parametric value that can be applied by anybody. So just to kind of back up again, next time somebody on the board asks, hey, here's a cool weapon I wouldn't mind seeing in Urban Terror Resurgence. Do you think you can do it? No, the standard response is going to be for that. Yeah, sure we can, but why don't you do it? And we can take the item as a submission under Creative Commons 0 as just one of the options that we have available to us, and become a little bit more community involved in the development of the game rather than depending upon on a hope and a wish that something might be added if somebody has the time or even the desire to add it in the first place. So to finish that off, obviously, I just personally I find this stuff interesting. How things, I'm the kind of guy that watches the television shows as how is it made, or the engineering how-tos that they do put on from time to time of these big machines and what have you, and the only reason I really buy DVDs is for that back end behind the scenes information, which is cheap learning in my opinion. But on the other hand, if there's something that you're a little bit more interested in hearing about, possibly a little bit more in depth, showing off a little secret sauce behind the scene of how something actually functions within the bigger picture, so to speak, would be more than happy to use that as a content of producing some kind of show or something a little bit more entertaining beyond superficial, something that's a little bit more doesn't say much about us actually doing something. Okay, anyways, I'm starting to ramble on. The caffeine's starting to wear off, so I'll catch you on the next one. Hopefully this will keep you a little bit more satisfied until I get there. But by all means, if I'm slacking behind, feel free to give me a poke, and I'll see if I can come up with something a little bit more interesting than the technical details that I find would probably be rather boring. Okay, see you later. Bye.